At the end of a long fast, the brain splits from the soul, sending a barrage of thoughts, all clever justifications for why 70 hours is long enough. The barrage is nonstop and without peace. The reason to fast must be stronger than starvation. Only when the reason is understood can there be commitment, and when there is commitment, there is peace. It's brisket. Leaving the noise of my mind, my consciousness reappears to the side of a firefighter in civilian clothes attending to a smoker. I assume firefighter because he's in front of the Ripple Village fire station. The reason why I began to fast is not the same reason that exists now, and I'm not certain what exists. I have to reaffirm my commitment. Thoughts aim to depress me. I've watched them trying to coddle me out of my final 2 hours. I reach for a reason to continue, but can't remember why I started. It's like drowning. And I watch. My stomach and body have accepted temporary hunger. It's only my mind in contention now. The thoughts in my head are a drama. I don't act or identify with them. Behind the noise, there is an immovable belief. I believe life to be important, and I believe my life is important. And I believe that as serious as is life and death, so too is finishing this fast. In this thought, my mind relinquishes the desire for food, and I gratefully accept finishing the journey. Nearing the canal, there's an apprehension to move forward. I see the feeling, but pay it no attention. I cross the bridge where the canal is dammed. I remember the encounter in the forest. He said he'd kill an innocent man. There's a stone the size of my fist just off the path. I think of showing my palms to the geese and of the knife I'd left by my sleeping bag. I leave the stone in its place and make another decision instead. At the dam, the water drizzles from the river into the canal. Through the gently crashing water, I hear chants in the distance. My life, my choice, my death, my choice. The hospital winds around and both the canal and hospital end at the MHC. I turn a corner and see the mob crowded at the bottom of the MHC steps. Why are they chanting? What do they want now? Straining to discern the crowd of about 100 people, I try to pick out Thomas. I look onward and I'm looking for Thomas, but I think of the girl with the green eyes who I'd seen protesting days before. I am looking for Thomas, but I want to see her, for no other reason than to see her. Suddenly, at the front of the crowd, closest to the steps, the chants become incoherent rahs and joyous shouts. Those in the back see what is happening and start cheering as well. Towards the front, a figure rises above the rest and then rises higher with his back towards the crowd. He's walking up the stairs. My heart sinks into my stomach. Thomas, I yell, and noise leaves my mouth, but it's suffocated by the mob of cheers. I remember the dreams I'd had in the forest and the feeling of yelling without making a noise. I yell again. Thomas! He continues up the steps without looking back. I run forward and yell again, staying far enough behind the crowd in hopes that he'll look back and see me. He enters the MHC and I find myself trapped behind the mob. I put my head down and work through the crowd towards the steps. The apathy turns to a subtle rage as I walk through with pushes and shoves. I'm going to go up the stairs and get Thomas out. I near the steps and lift my gaze for only a moment, and when I do, there's a familiar leer of green eyes looking over at me. Annoyed, I look at her with disgust as she shouts, You! Moving away from her, I continue sliding through people, towards the steps, and hear more shouting. I'm being followed. You did this. It's still only coming from her. I try to avoid the confrontation. There's a tug on the bottom of my pullover. I think of the courtyard and of her shouting in the bullhorn. A resentful annoyance washes over me. I grab the wrist of the hand holding my pullover and prepare to shout. When I turn to yell, You did this, I stop abruptly as I see her crying. Her wrist still in my hand, she becomes more emotionally frantic. They're going to kill my father. I let go of her wrist. She continues shouting accusations. You work here, don't you? This is all part of your plan. At the steps, a male is leading the chants. 2 layers of people ahead of us. I notice him walk up a few steps to bring the mob back into articulate unity. Raising my voice, I get closer so she can hear me. I have nothing to do with this place. What do you mean they're going to kill your father? He didn't attack anyone. He'd never hurt anybody. You set him up. It's hard to hear what she's saying. I think of John and his long white hair. I look back into her green eyes, boiling in the red of weeping tears. I look at the steps where Thomas entered. Look at me. You tell them the truth. Make this right. She has on a long-sleeve white shirt. It's long to her thighs. I look down and can't see her pants. I feel my face grimace at her. I don't feel a seriousness towards her. Behind where she followed me is a wall of people 3 layers deep. Come over here. I lead her out of the crowd so I can hear. What do you mean I did this? I ask, still loud but heard outside the noise of the crowd. It was your conversation with him that Jim Torrey pointed to, saying he's deranged. He didn't attack anyone, but people know what he spoke about with you, so they think he did. Wait, so you're saying John is your father? The man I spoke to in the park is your dad? Yeah, so now they're going to put him to death because of you. Who did they say he attacked? No one. They didn't name anyone because there is no one. I was here when it happened. He'd told people not to go into the MHC. I didn't know about it until the second day he was out here. I came after graduation because I heard of a counter-protest, and when I arrived, they were walking him up the steps. I thought you saw it. How do you know he didn't attack anyone? I ask, but don't believe him to be violent either. He didn't. Torrey only said that so they could get rid of him and have a reason to bring more people in against their will. So then, what are you doing out here? Why are you still protesting? Why don't you tell someone? Who am I to tell? The cops? Everyone believes he's a danger. Tell Dr. Kane. He doesn't care about patients or treatment. He's running a business. And his business is getting people in and through the MHC without friction. I'm confused as to how or why they'd keep him in there like it's a jail cell, but instead I ask the pertinent question. Why did the man go in there a little bit ago? I don't know. Looking for treatment? I look away from her and up the stairs. Through the chaos of the moment, I know Thomas and John are both in the MHC. I don't believe John to have attacked anyone, and I also don't see a path to bring John out of the MHC. Thomas was nonchalantly walking up the steps. What is he doing here? I think of Michael Seth and the lack of respect towards him, despite only having met him a few times. I think of my phone and how I didn't read any additional messages. I think further of John. He doesn't seem like a person whom things happen by accident. But then the devil in the forest said he'd kill an innocent man. And he also described not wanting to be the person who turned the river gold. And then he told me I'd nourish him for a long time. I look back away from the steps. Well, I'm going to go in. Speaking through my heart, I'll tell you, I want to be out here and not in there. So if I don't leave, know they've held me against my will. And if they kill me, know that I fasted and my spirit survived. She looks up at me, confused at the comment and clearly only wanting John out of the MHC. She shouts to speak over the crowd. You need to make this right. I scan her again. In response to her demands, I show her a look of aversion. I slide through the crowd and attempt to move up the steps incognito. The crowd sends cheers of joyful sympathy. He's so brave. We support you. Get your treatment. Still within earshot, I turn to face the crowd. I want to tell them something. I feel contempt for what they're doing. They're propagating the problem. It's not a trivial, they believe this and I believe that. They believe in hatred and not love. It isn't their fault. They're being animated by the source of hatred. I understand the desire for hatred and the fire it brings to one's stomach, but it's a toxic flame. I understand how I could be these people. Had I been born into a different life, or simply if this had happened instead of that, Turning to face the crowd, I decide to speak. I think of the truest sentence I know, and it's like the beginning of a story that never happened, yet is truer than one that did. I'm here today because of a time when I was a young man. The crowd hushes to hear. We support you. One day I went into a forest alone. In the forest, there was a stream and an old bridge to cross the other side. The bridge was rusty. It'd been there decades, maybe centuries. On the day I went in alone, I found a man chained to the bridge who appeared to me a demon. The crowd now continues to watch in silence. With the shackles on his wrist, he stood up but could not reach me. He told me it was his brother who'd chained him there, and that his father had shackled him and his brother to this bridge when they were young boys. The man then pulled a key out of his pocket, looking to fit his shackles. He told me his father told them that the key is only to be used on his brother's shackle and vice versa, and that if he ever used his key, it'd break the lock and he'd be trapped not only in this life, but in the lives after this one. He then gave me his key when I told him I'd trade it for his brother's. I look up over the heads of people and see the sun glistening off of the canal. I am sure I look overcome with emotion in telling this personal tale, but really I am thinking of a way to end the story. I continue. The next day I went back to the forest, and without saying anything, so as not to lie, used the key he gave me, and the man was free. Not to my surprise, the man then tried to kill me, but I'd brought my knife. And for those of you who have eyes, you should open them. I can see that you have ears, so you should hear. Some faces turn hostile, and others cheer without knowing what they're cheering about. I jog up the remaining 2/3 of the steps and see my reflection on the glass door. I notice my canine teeth are like that of an ape, and the thought of being an ape makes me laugh. I become serious because the contrast between the light outside and the dark in the MHC is dramatic, and my eyes have to adjust.